House of EdTech, Episode 12. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Christopher Nessie. The House of EdTech podcast explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. My objectives include discussing technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and sharing information that you can hear about today and use tomorrow, by talking to other teachers, leaders, and creators like you, and having them share their stories. Because whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way we teach and how our students learn. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the House of EdTech. I am really excited to be here. One, school is almost over, but I'm not excited because school is almost over. But school's almost over. Summer is just about here. I was able to spend a couple days this week at the Jersey Shore, where I'll be spending a lot of time this summer with my wife and the little guy. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of summer. And also, barbecues and time with family and friends, as I like to do every summer. So it's going to be really exciting. And since I'm living really pretty much at the Jersey Shore, I'll be very exposed to the sand and the waves, and I should wind up getting a very nice tan. So I'm very excited about that. Coming up in this episode, not to get too far off track, I have a fantastic interview with Theresa Stager. She is a elementary school principal out in Michigan. And she's also the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts, the Principal Cast podcast, over on teachercast.net. And I have the EdTech Thought, which is really cool this week, so don't skip ahead. Get through the interview first. And I also have my EdTech recommendation. And another installment of everybody's favorite, House of EdTech VIP. Skip ahead if you want, but I wouldn't want you to miss out on anything that's really cool with my interview. So, why don't we get right to that? My featured content? Here we go. And now for this episode's featured content, I'd like to welcome in Miss Theresa Stager. She is a first-year principal at St. Mary Catholic School in Rockwood, Michigan. She's the co-creator and co-host of the Principal Cast podcast on the TeacherCast Educational Broadcasting Network, which you can find at principalcast.com. She was a music teacher in Michigan public schools for 8 years. She now uses her time and talent as a lead learner and educational consultant in the areas of technology and teaching strategies. She also picks up projects here and there as well. She has a bachelor's in music education from Wayne State University and a master's in public administration, assessment, and evaluation from the University of Michigan. So with that, welcome in the Wolverine, Theresa Stager.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful intro.
That's how I do it here on the House of EdTech.
It's very much appreciated. I think I'm going to have you follow me around and do my intro all the time. That's wonderful.
If I learned how to play an instrument, I could do theme music as well.
That's what GarageBand is for.
Well, welcome to the show. I'm really happy that you're able to take your time on a Saturday. But as we said before we came on, school's over for you.
That's right, it is. Today is our first official day of summer vacation. So summer vacation for the students, of course, the principals don't take that time. But yeah, it's very exciting. And thank you for having me on. This is a great opportunity, and I'm very excited.
Cool. So you'll be back in your office on Monday getting ready for September, right?
I will, yes. We have some wrap up things that have to happen. I'm starting a summer learning program this year. So it's a remote summer learning program, but so I have a lot of work to do on that in the next couple of weeks. And, just wrapping things up, we came in kind of in turmoil in this school because there was a lot of turnover last year. There were a lot of administrators last year. So we kind of came in and just survived this first year, and I had a new secretary and a lot of new staff. So these next couple weeks will be spent really cementing policies and procedures and just getting everything the way that we want it, so we're comfortable starting August and not just surviving.
All great points that make me say, I don't want to climb the ladder.
It's not so bad, but I enjoy policies and procedures, so it's kind of like, nerd heaven for me.
Well, I enjoy following policies and procedure as the teacher.
Well, then, yes, you should stay where you are.
Well, before we talk about technology, what led you to music and a career in education as your profession?
Oh, good question. I've always been a musician, and I love playing the piano. I loved playing in bands and orchestras and singing in choir, and I had a wonderful, wonderful elementary music teacher. She was amazing, and I always felt going through high school that music education was so underappreciated, and that bothered me because it has just so many benefits to the students, to the school. And I knew I always wanted to be a teacher. I loved being in the classroom. I loved learning. I loved teaching. And I had thought about being a math teacher. And then I was like, it only felt right to teach music because it felt like I had the passion to help kids love it. I had a music teacher in high school that I loved, but he didn't love his job. And so that made me sad. And I felt like a lot of the students were missing an opportunity to have someone who loved music teach it to them. And so I did, and I got a job. My first interview, I was picked up as an elementary music teacher. And from that point, I jumped in, and I was able to use my love of technology in those classrooms, which was great. And I was pulled into a company, the high school choir, and I got to help doing a lot of policies and procedures that way. But I knew, unfortunately, I wasn't going to be able to retire as a music teacher because it's one of the first things that is cut in a district. And in a time of pretty big recession in Michigan, we lost a lot of great music teachers. And so I knew that if I were to ever be laid off, I was not going to find another job in music because there were so many other people with more experience than me who were also looking for jobs that it would just be an uphill battle all the time. And that was hard for me to be able to grasp. So I thought administration would be something that I could also teach because I'd be able to teach teachers, but still, make changes and do things that were important. So I had my master's in administration, and I taught for 2 years after that, and then was laid off in a huge layoff. There were 30 some teachers that were laid off. I was the highest seniority that year, and we only had 300 teachers in the district. So it was a big layoff, and so I was prepared, luckily, because I knew, at some point it would come. But that, teaching was always my love, and so now I'm still able to do it, just in a different way.
Well, I learned from that we have something in common. I also thought about becoming a math teacher.
Look at that.
For me, though, I got tired of taking all the classes twice my first 2 years in college, so I had to make a change.
Agreed.
My dad reminded me that the math you take in college is not the math you will ever teach.
That's the truth.
And the problem is that I was good at high school math. So
right. yeah. That would have been math. Teaching math, I give every teacher a ton of credit, but I think math is way up there on the top of holy crap.
Now you mentioned briefly that you did use technology as a music teacher. What are some ways that you integrated music into the music classroom? I just say music? Oh.
Yeah, but I know you meant integrating technology in the music classroom. I was in a district that really struggled with being able to let students use technology, and that bothered me. They didn't want any collaboration. They were afraid. Social media was outlawed. Blogs were outlawed. I actually had someone tell me I had created over the summer a website for our high school choir, and I had this great idea that we have to be able to use writing all across the curriculum. So the district was mandating that, which we were already doing, but the district had mandated that even in the specials classes, there was at least one writing assignment every week. So I created a blog, and I thought this would be a great way to do it because we had a computer lab right next to our high school choir classroom. And I would make a blog, and then we could get the kids, without using their names, we could use, the name of the class and then a number for each student. And we would post a prompt and have the kids respond to it. And that was going to be it. And so I created a WordPress blog. And I spent all summer doing it. I was so excited. I was all over Twitter and getting all these great ideas. And then I got to school and it was blocked. And so I called the technology director and said, "How do I get this unblocked?" And he's like, "Well, we can't." And I said, "What do you mean you can't?" And he said, "Well, we can't just unblock one site." And, this was in like 2004. So it was a little bit different than it is now. But he said, "We can't just unblock one site. We have to unblock WordPress as a whole. And we're not going to do that." And I said, "Well, okay." So I went back and I went on Twitter and said, "What is another option for this?" And they said EduBlogs. So I moved everything over to EduBlogs, and I got to school and that was blocked too. And I said, "You have to be kidding. How can we fix this?" And they said, "We can tell you right now, if there is the possibility of the students being able to talk to each other, that it will be blocked." And I thought that was so ridiculous. So we ended up, so that was that part of it. They ended up unblocking EduBlogs after they did a little bit of research. But I had one computer in my elementary classroom that was hooked up to a TV, and we would do a lot of theory games. We would do a lot of group activities, things that we wouldn't, taking them on virtual field trips to, see Carnegie Hall and things like that. So that was before really the iPads, but then the iPods came out and were really big. And so I was able to utilize the iPods a ton for listening stations and, having the students record things so that they could listen back. And then I went to the McCall conference, which is the Michigan Association for Computer Users and Learning. And I had learned that they were using a ton of music programs in general ed classrooms. They were using GarageBand for teaching literacy, and they were using Finale for teaching it was also in reading for doing fluency in reading. And it was really interesting to me that they were able to do both. So then I worked with a lot of the staff in the district and in my building especially, trying to implement that. And I had a great technology teacher in our building, and so she was gung-ho about it. And we did a lot of I had the smart board in my classroom, and it was the kids loved it. The students were all about it. So it was a good springboard because I was able to utilize a lot of technologies. And I'm telling you, Twitter was ridiculous because I would go on Twitter and there were so many music teachers, so many amazing ideas. I had things bookmarked or favorited in Twitter that I wanted to go back to. And I have so many things that I will never get to them all. And I remember bookmarking these and going, I wish I had a double bookmark so that I knew that this was one I really wanted to go back to. But it was just such a wealth of information that it gave me even more ideas to be able to utilize technology in the classroom.
Yes, I've also been able to, from time to time, find a couple of resources on Twitter.
Yeah, just a few, I'm sure.
Is there anything that you specifically remember using in the classroom as like an app or some software that we could recommend to other music teachers?
Oh gosh, yeah. I had used my elementary kids, my lower elementary kids loved a program called Jumpstart Music, and it's just a little CD-ROM, but we played it as a group, and they would sit behind the TV because we only had one thing in the classroom, one computer in the classroom, so they would sit, and I would have them use different signs or signals to answer questions that, I would just turn it into a group game as opposed to an individual game, but they loved that. I used iMovie, one of my favorite projects, which I did for the first time the year that I was laid off. But the kids were all about it. We learned about Peter and the Wolf, and they had to retell, this was my second grade class, they had to retell the story of Peter and the Wolf in their own words. They had to use just like bullet point sentences. And so I broke them up into groups of 4, and they wrote, I think 30 sentences to get them through the story. Then they drew a picture for each one of those bullet points. colored it in and made it their illustration. And then they would have to come up with a soundtrack to go behind it using classroom instruments. So, Peter always has this rhythm with this instrument, just like in the normal one, but they had to come up with their own. And then we would do a recording day where the students, one of the kids would be a narrator and the other ones would do their playing of their themes for each character. And when that was all done, I recorded that on, I think, just the voice recorder. There's a music recorder. It's got a red icon, but I can't think of the name of it right now. And I would use that. And then I imported the audio into GarageBand and I took all the pictures. I would use my document camera and just take the pictures of their pictures and import those. And then they had a movie and I put it up on Vimeo and they could show it to their grandparents, because in music, it's a little bit different than, in art or in phys ed, because they can go home and play the games that they're learning in phys ed and they can bring home the art that they're creating in class. But in music, there's not always a product to bring home. So I found that the kids really liked that, because that was a way, and the parents did too, because it was a way that they could be in the classroom with them.
That's an awesome project.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. And it was a long-term project. It probably took 5 or 6 weeks, which is about the same amount of time you would spend preparing for a concert. So, but it covered a ton of the curriculum and the kids just ate it up.
And that would be great at any level to,
absolutely.
Right up through high school.
Yeah, you could pick any piece of music and, then they can start, as the kids get older, they can start incorporating GarageBand, or they can start incorporating some other sort of, musical idea. And it has so many. And I think that was the main idea of the project, was one that I found on Twitter. And then I just elaborated on it and I had them, draw the pictures and things like that. But that was one of those that it was a fantastic idea.
And even not even in a music classroom, as a social studies teacher, I could incorporate, music to bring that into social studies, or I'm sure there's a way you could even bring it into math. I'm
sure you could. My science teacher at school, my middle school science teacher, the kids they've done plays this year on, they had to create an iMovie on one of the topics that they did in science throughout the year. So the kids were doing nutrition, or they were talking about, the life cycle, and she's done raps with them. They've had to come up, create a rap, having to do with whatever. The possibilities are endless in any classroom. It's just an ability, just the idea that you just have to tweak it to what works for your classroom.
Absolutely. How do you now, as I don't know if you know Jay Eitner, the superintendent here in New Jersey, who is...
I do.
Okay. He calls what you do now going to the dark side.
Right.
How do you integrate technology now as an administrator? Because you mentioned before that when you started bringing in WordPress or EduBlogger, blocked.
Yeah.
Now you are the one who wields a little bit more power, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I have all that power because we don't have, I am the technology director in my building.
And how do you leverage technology now as an administrator?
As an administrator, we, like I mentioned earlier, we have a 1-to-1 iPad program in my building, which that was one of the first things that I did this year, was bring that in and start implementing that. So with the 1-to-1 iPad program, there was a lot of discussion about what we were going to allow and what was going to be open and usable for the students. My staff network is unblocked. It's completely open. And so they have carte blanche to do whatever they feel is appropriate within the curriculum. So they're allowed to use YouTube. The only thing that we've suggested is that they look at it first to make sure that there's not an ad at the beginning or something, on the sidebar that might be inappropriate. But they are allowed to do really anything that they want to use. The students have, we have a firewall on the network for pornography and adult material and things like that, but nothing else is blocked. Social media is not blocked, because we've really prided ourselves on being able to show the students appropriate use of technology. And, we've had discussions, we've had hard discussions with Instagram. Say, you know what, it probably shouldn't be on your school device. Take it off. This is not, but if you are using Instagram, this is the appropriate way to use it. This is not, making sure that anything that goes out is something that you would show your grandma or the priest of the school or, anyone, because as soon as you put it out there, it's free reign. So we've had a lot of those conversations, but our one-to-one program is pre-K through 8th grade. So we've had to kind of tailor that common sense to the different grade levels. Now we use, the teachers use the iPads in the classroom. They use it for all of the subjects. They've been using Edmodo to be able to continue the learning outside of the classroom, which also really helped during our snow days this year. We had 14 snow days in some of our neighboring areas. I think we ended up with 10, but it was still over the amount that we had allotted for. And so once the iPads were implemented and Edmodo was set up, when we knew that there was a snowstorm coming, I would ask the teachers to create 2 to 3 hours worth of work that they would either be able to have a discussion on Edmodo or an assignment that the students could do from home and submit on Edmodo so that we weren't losing out on those days. Because I think in the month of January, we were going back to school after New Year's Day on the 3rd or 4th. It was pretty close to the very beginning. And then we only had 12 days of instruction in January because of all the snow. And February or March, one of the two, was pretty close, following up with that. So that was extremely helpful so that we didn't lose all of that time. But I have an administrator blog that I put instead of sending emails out all the time, I put everything on the blog. I put websites, we do professional development. Everything is up there so that the teachers can go back to it at any point instead of having to search through emails. We have an iTunes U site that we're setting up right now that will have all of the resources that they could possibly ever need, including tutorials on, how to back up your iPad. For some of our teachers, iPads were a very new thing. How to install an app, how to delete an app, things like that. And so if we do have new staff members, we don't want to have to go through what we did this year of training everyone individually. We're in a very old building, so we don't have telephones in each of the classrooms. In the past, they've used personal cell phones, they've used walkie-talkies, but this year with the implementation of the iPads, as well as we were able to purchase the teachers' new MacBook Airs to use. Also, we use the iMessage program to contact everybody because our school is the way that it's set up, it's pre-K through 8, but it's just one very long building, and it's a long new building and a long old building, and so we are right in the middle. And there's a cafeteria in between. You have to go up and down stairs. And so if there's something that's very timely that we don't want to put, there's the preschoolers are napping after lunch. We don't want to do a school announcement and wake the preschoolers up if it's something that we can just let the teachers know via iMessage. So that's been a huge tool for us technology-wise. And I've been very lucky that my staff is so open and excited about it. I mean, there's my 8th grade teacher there's an app, I could find the name of it, but I don't remember, but it's a comic strip app. There are a ton of them around where you find these comic strips and then you add the speaking bubbles to them. And she started having the students create those on their iPads using their vocabulary words. So they have their vocabulary words every week and they have to create one of these that incorporates all of their words. And then, then they're showing them at the staff meetings and they've got them hanging up in the hallways. She prints them off and hangs them up. And then the other teachers catch on and they get excited about it. And it's a way, that the students can learn real world application to, why they're learning their vocabulary words.
So many good ideas, Theresa. It's you're a wealth of knowledge. And this is all from a first year principal.
It is. It is.
When you come in as the first year principal, did they think you were crazy? Did they embrace you in all the technology? Did they have a technology culture before you came?
They didn't. And, it was odd the way that it worked out because when I came in, we were in at the very bottom of a slump of enrollment. They've had a few very difficult years with a lot of turnover with staff. Last year, there were 4 administrators in my building, all by November 1. It was a really, last year was the last of a few very tough years. And so I was brought in to stabilize things. And when they said, do you want to make a lot of changes your first year, or what is your thought? I said, to be totally honest, I haven't even gotten into my office yet, but my hope is to just be able to stabilize things. And then if there are things that we see that need to be changed, then we'll look at that. So I had started doing some research with one of my good friends growing up is actually the K-12 education rep for Apple for the state of Michigan. So I contacted him and I said, listen, I might have this job as a principal. I'm looking into, what one-to-one iPads might look like, because they have a computer lab that's kind of old. They're looking at textbooks. What do we do? And so I had it priced out, and I had kind of created a plan that said, well, here's how we could do this if indeed this was something we wanted to do. And so I took it to the school board after I had been hired, and I said, this is just an idea that I have that maybe next year might be something worth exploring. And so I'd given them the quote. We have a low number of students this year because of the dip in enrollment. So this year or next year would be a great time to do this, because it would be a lower startup cost and easier for the teachers because there are less students to have to worry about. And just to kind of, backtrack a little bit, the job that I had in between teaching and getting this job was as an implementation director for a payrolling company. So I knew how to do an implementation. And I think that gave them a little bit of confidence, because they knew that this was coming from, a knowledge that I already had. So I had brought it up at the school board meeting. This was in July or August. And I said, just to have this in your hip pocket, just think about it. And the meeting was over, and I went to the restroom before I went home, and I came out, and there were 5 or 6 of the school board members there that said, you know what? I think we should do this now. And I said, I'm sorry, what? They said, this is really exciting. This could be something very huge for our school, and we are in a point of crisis. So, go big or go home. So we think we should do it now. And so we took it to the parish council and the finance committee, and we actually had it all just fell into place. There's a fund in the county that we are in that a very wealthy parishioner of one of the parishes around here had left this education fund for each of the Catholic schools that surrounded it. And it was a large sum of money. So we've been borrowing against it for, things like the technology lab or the teachers' computers, and then just paying it back over the years that we have them, kind of like a loan from ourselves. And so they decided that this would be the perfect project to utilize some of that money. So instead of taking it as a loan, they just took it to pay for this program. So we had our iPad, the pilot, the fourth graders had the pilot, and that was at the beginning of October, the mid-October, after we took our standardized tests. We had the iPads in the classroom in October in one of our classrooms, and everybody had them by the end of January. And it just flew. It was wonderful. I went to the McCall conference and got some more great ideas on utilizing them. Larry Baker is a principal in Michigan. He's at Mercy High School, about 45 minutes north of us. And he had a tech conference. This was the first year. It was called the Mercy Talk, Tech Talk Conference. And Liz Kolb was the keynote speaker. It was just a day, but he had a ton of people there, and they have a one-to-one iPad program, and he had so many great ideas, and all the people there had great ideas. And so I took my whole staff, or 6 of them, I think, and then out of 11 teachers. And this year we're actually making that day a professional development day, and the whole staff is going to go, because it's so knowledgeable. But, throughout the year we've picked up, plus on Twitter, and with everyone else who has a one-to-one iPad program, we've learned so many things. But it came real quick, and thank God they didn't think I was crazy. I mean, I walked into the most amazing situation, because they jumped on my bandwagon from day one and have been supportive, you know, supportive with, within reason, but they always had the right questions to ask, and they were amazing, but they've let me do what I thought was necessary. And next year we have not only have we not lost students, but we're looking at a 10% increase because of the stability that we've been able to provide and the support of the parents and the school board that we have. It's really been an amazing year.
I was just about to say, this is an amazing story. And I mean, first you need to get your doctorate so you can go be a teacher of teachers at the university and college level and teach administrators what they need to do.
Well, thank you.
Because you, as I like to say, you get it.
Right.
And with a little bit of luck, as most things we do in this life, the ball bounced the right way for you in this position.
Yeah, so, it really did.
Kudos to you, and keep the ideas going.
Thank you.
I can only imagine what's going to happen in year 2.
I know. I'm so excited. We're actually starting this summer. I had mentioned earlier a summer learning program. I got this idea from Liz Kolb, who did the keynote at the Mercy Tech Talk conference. She was showing us a kind of like a Remind 101 type service where you can, and we already have something like that through Power School. It's called School Reach, and it's amazing, and it has saved us countless times this year with being able to communicate with the parents. But she had mentioned how one of the schools that she knew was using this as a summer learning thing. And what they would do is every Monday through the summer, the students would get some sort of a science assignment per se, something to do that had to do with science. On Tuesday, it would be social studies. On Wednesday, it would be math, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I had talked to a few of the teachers who were there, and I said, that is an amazing idea because we take our standardized tests in October. And that's pretty quick when you return from the summer. There's not a whole lot of time to not only get back what you've lost over the summer, but to prepare yourself for these tests. And so the students are anxious and they're worried, and the teachers are anxious and worried. So I said, how can we use this to our advantage? So what we're doing this year is we are sending home an assignment that is based, I had all of the teachers give me in just one list. I have other lesson plans, I look at them, but it was so much easier to just have them send me a list. And I said, I want to know what you've covered in the last month and a half in your classrooms, in every subject. So, I told them that they would not have to do anything for this because our school is so small, and I know the teachers and I know the curriculum so well. I don't feel like this is something they need to do. And it's kind of fun for me. So what I've been doing is creating, I have a couple folders on Pinterest. I have a few folders online, and we've told the parents that starting the week of June 23rd, which gives the students 2 full weeks out of school without this, we will be sending home every day a 1 to 2 hour assignment, project, thing to do that reinforces what they learned right before they left. So not only does this help our kids, and it's completely voluntary, but I know most of our students have opted in because it helps the parents too. It gives them something to do every single day, and you don't have to do it. I have an Edmodo group that they can turn the assignments in. We can chat about it, but my hope is that when we get back to school in August, that the teachers will find that the students have lost less, because I think the summer, the missing piece that we just don't look at anymore is how much we're missing over the summer because we're so focused on what we have to get in between August and June that we don't, it's summer, the kids need to, but they don't need to relax. They need to be able to have something to keep their brains going over the summer. And so we're hoping that with the base that we've set this year with utilizing these technologies and utilizing this information, that and it also helps our new students coming in because now they're on the same page, because we may be further than the school that they came from curriculum wise. So this gets everybody in the same place, and we're hoping that we'll see a little bit more stability and calm in the classrooms come August before the exams.
that's a fantastic initiative to a very interesting problem. I didn't realize that standardized testing took place at different times in different places.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to switch gears completely.
Sure.
Still sticking with professional.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who would be very upset if I didn't bring up the keyword Principal Cast. Now, I've talked about Principal Cast on the program before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a regular participant.
Yes, you are. And we love it.
What inspired you as a first-year principal in administration to then decide to create a podcast?
When I was teaching and I had received my master's in administration, like I had mentioned earlier, I knew at some point that was going to be where I was going to end up, and I wanted to be prepared for it. I felt comfortable enough in music that I didn't feel like I had to be constantly learning new things like I did, the 8 years prior. I love to learn, and I think that is a part of it. I love learning new things, and I love sharing things. So with that said, I had come across Melinda Miller and Scott Elias had done a principals podcast that they got together once a month and discuss, sometimes twice a month, and discuss what they were doing. Melinda was an elementary principal. Scott was a high school principal. And I think he was elementary at some point too. And they had talked about how they utilized technology in the classroom and how they utilize technology with their staff, and not just technology, but issues that they had. What is a nighttime look like for a high school principal? What does a weekend look like? What do you need to know before you get into this job? It's like, I feel like the best attended classes at a conference are the ones that are titled What They Didn't Teach You in School, because that as soon as you step into your student teaching, you feel completely unprepared, because although you've learned everything in the book, it's brand new. Until you step into that role, you don't know. So to hear from people who do, it was very interesting to me, and I loved listening to those. And then Scott was hired at Apple and left administration, and the podcast just stopped. And this was probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, I think. And I was bummed. I was like, I went back and started listening to, and I didn't know, because I had gotten this job outside of education, and I was, fully immersed in that. And so when I got this job, I went back and I was like, oh my gosh, there is no more, it's gone. Practical Principles is gone. What are we going to do? So I contacted Melinda Miller and I said, what would you think about, because I knew that I wasn't the only person who missed it and who needed that information. And so I said, what would you think about starting it again, but maybe with me? And we could do, because before, I think she was like a newer principal, 5 or 6 years, and Scott, I think, had been. But I said, what do you think about doing this? And she's like, well, what are you thinking? I said, I don't know, maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, just whatever you're available to do. And she had said, I just don't think I can commit, but I think you should talk to Jessica Johnson, who is Principal J on Twitter. And I said, okay. So I talked to Jessica and I was like, what do you think? And she was like, I'm in. What do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And she goes, do you think we need a third person? I said, couldn't hurt. So she had contacted Spike Cook, who's Dr. Spike Cook on Twitter, and a few other people as well. And we were all on Voxer. And so we had kind of started, Jess and I had started talking about just ideas and when we might start and what this might look like. And Spike was the first person to respond back. And not only did he respond back, but he was super enthusiastic about it. And he was like, we should do it every week. And we were like, wait, what? And he goes, this would be great. We could do, it doesn't have to be an hour. Maybe it's 40 minutes and we'll do it every week. And so we said, okay, well, let's look at that. It's an option. So we did our first show on a Google Hangout on a Sunday night because it worked the best for all of us. And after the show, we got a text message or a message from a direct message on Twitter from Jeff Bradbury, who owns and runs the TeacherCast network. And he was like, I've been looking to start an administrator podcast. He's like, I even have principalcast.net.com.everything ready to go for when I got one. And I think we had done it under the hashtag of Principals Podcast. And he said, let me produce you. I was listening. I think this is what my network needs. And so we discussed it and we thought, this can't be bad. And it wasn't. And so he grabbed us, and the next week we were on the TeacherCast network, and all of a sudden we've got, people who like yourself, who are in the chat room and who are discussing, and it's a very cool process, because the podcast is happening, unlike, I love the EdChat podcast, because the EdChat podcast follows after the Twitter chat. And so they kind of go over and talk about what had happened during the chat and then move on from there. But I think it's such a neat dynamic to have the chat happening at the same time as the podcast, because it's a way that the audience can literally be interactive within the conversation. So it's being downloaded, by over 1,000 people every week, and we've got a ton of live views, and there's consistently like 25 to 30 people in the chat at 9:30 Eastern on a Sunday night, which is to me unreal, because there are days that we get ready and I'm like, I'm so tired. I don't know if I can, we sign on to the Google Hangout at 9:15 and I'm like, it's so late. But then we get on and everybody's talking and the ideas are so crazy and it's wonderful. And then I can't sleep on Sunday night because I'm so pumped up from the conversation. So, it's such an amazing resource. And I'm telling you, this last year, I feel like everything that could have happened as a first year administrator, our school was on fire, the parking lot was on fire. We've had multiple power outages. We've had lockdowns. We've had, I had to replace a teacher in October. I mean, I feel like everything that could have happened did. But for me as a first year administrator to be able to hear from someone who's been here and who's done it, that, just like a first year teacher, you're going to make it. You're going to look back and go, it really wasn't that bad. It's okay. And yesterday, my secretary and I were sitting down and having this discussion because she said, can you believe that it's over? It's done. The year is finished. And I said, no. And they were right. It wasn't bad. I mean, if I had to sit back and go through every month and try to remember all of the bad things that happened, I don't think I could, because of the huge support system that this podcast has created for us. And I think it's so, so important as I thought it was important as a music teacher, because you're by yourself in a building, and an administrator is the same way. You're the only one doing your job. And it's hard to have anyone to have that conversation with because no one understands. So to have people not only who understand, but can give you advice is just priceless. And so I think it just, Melinda is a, an every week addition to our podcast. She's come on as a special guest. And she is so supportive of it because she knows how important that it is. So it's another thing that I think the stars just aligned in the right way, and, it fell into place, and it's been amazing.
It's okay if you want to say it was divine intervention. You can use the phrase again.
I think it may have been.
Well, I truly can't appreciate what you do as a principal per se, because I don't work for you. But as a weekly tuner inner of the Principal Cast, I truly appreciate what you provide for me every week for an hour with your co-hosts and everybody involved. Before I let you go, I do want to borrow something from Principal Cast, so we're going to play a little game.
Oh, no. Oh, I should have known this was coming.
I didn't know it was coming till I thought of it about 30 seconds ago.
Well done.
So we're going to play a little word association game.
Do I get to play it the way that it's done, or do I get to play like the Wisconsin principals play it and the Wisconsin principals?
We're playing this East Coast style.
Right. For those who are listening to this who don't know what we're talking about, when we do a word association on Principal Cast whenever we have a guest host, and it's always a good time. But for some reason, when the Wisconsin principals play this game, they answer in sentences and just long drawn out. And so we try to explain that it's one word. You only get one word. So I will try to stick to that one word.
I don't know if mine will be one words to start, but you got to give one word answers.
Deal.
So I'll be a Wisconsin type host.
Deal.
Okay, here we go. Jessica Johnson.
Insane.
Hashtag agree. Dr. Spike Cook.
Motivated.
Hashtag agree. Technology integration.
Necessary.
You are very good. Hashtag ding ding. And the final one, because again, I didn't prep this game ahead of time. Final phrase, music.
I'm using my Wisconsin card on this one. It's so important.
Hashtag show me it's important. Yes, it is. Well, Theresa, I want to thank you for taking a huge chunk of your day off after a long first year as principal, for being on the House of EdTech. Before I do let you go, what are some ways that now my listeners can get in touch with you and pick your brain a little further?
Sure, I would love it. I'm available on Twitter at Principal Stager, Stager. I have my blog is principalstager.com, and of course on the Principal Cast podcast every Sunday night at 9:30 at teachercast.tv. You can tune in live. You can add to the chat. You can watch it right from there. And that's probably between Twitter and the podcast. That's probably the best way. But I love, 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 love hearing from people and getting questions. So please send them.
She's not kidding, folks. You need to reach out to her. She will definitely communicate with you. And with that, I have now spoken to 2 of the 3 principal casters.
Yes.
So now I got to try and lock down Dr. Spike Cook. Thank you again, Theresa, for taking time out of your day on your first Saturday off after your first year as principal. I can't thank you enough.
I so appreciate it very, very much. Thank you for having me on. This was great.
All right, Theresa, we will talk to you again.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
And now for my EdTech thought. This one I have titled, Teacher Tool Setup. As you may or may not know, Google Classroom is coming out this September. To me, that doesn't make much sense. Google should be releasing a potential game changer like Classroom now. Teachers need time to play with tools and work out the kinks and the bugs. I don't know many teachers, if any, who could just sit on the first day of school and say, I feel like starting to use a new learning management system with my students this year. And I think I'm going to start right now. And it's September 1st, let's say. If something like this is going to come out, it should come out now. I know I wish it was. That's my EdTech thought. And now it's time for the EdTech recommendation for this episode. I'd like to recommend Notepad.cc. To put it simply, Notepad.cc is a piece of paper in the cloud. There is no sign-up or registration, and it's free. When you go to Notepad.cc, you are presented with a blank page that you can start typing on. There's no rich formatting, no rich text. There's really not many options at all. You are just simply able to start typing. You can paste from another source into this document, and the only options that exist once you're on it are at the bottom of the screen. You have the option to change the randomly assigned URL, and you could also add a password to your page and then give other people access to it. I've set up a demo page that I'd love for you to go and check out, and you can go to the address notepad.cc/houseofedtech. The password is 1234. Let me know where you're from and how you think you could use technology like Notepad.cc in your classroom or school. I would love to know your ideas, and then I can share them in a future episode. So head over to notepad.cc/houseofedtech. And before we wrap things up for this episode, the House of EdTech just wouldn't be complete unless I told you who the House of EdTech VIP is. So congratulations to Kyle Calderwood. Kyle is a technology coordinator from Tuckerton, New Jersey, at the elementary school, where he helps teachers infuse their instruction with new technologies. Kyle earned his bachelor's in communications and his master's in instructional technology, both from the Richard Stockton College of New Jersey, where he is also an adjunct professor. At Stockton, he teaches a digital tools course that better prepares undergraduates for the job market. Kyle is also the organizer of an upcoming summer professional development opportunity known as TeachMeet NJ, which is a free K-12 education technology conference. TeachMeet New Jersey will take place this August on the 18th, 2014, at the Richard Stockton College. The cost is free. I will be there, so if that just isn't enough to get you to New Jersey, I would hope to see you there. If you'd like to attend TeachMeet NJ, just go to www.teachmeetnj.com for more information and to register for this awesome conference that I am very much looking forward to attending. And, of course, I do recommend that you connect with Kyle through social media and online. You can find him on Twitter, and his handle is KCalderW. That's KCalderW. And you should also check out his About Me website, which is about.me/KCalderW. And that's spelled the same way as his Twitter handle. So congratulations to Kyle Calderwood. You are the House of EdTech VIP. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the House of EdTech. Once again, I am Christopher Nesi. Please keep the conversation going and visit my website, mr.chrisnesi.com. You can also check out the show notes for this episode at mr.chrisnesi.com/2014/05/houseofedtech12.html. If you have questions or comments, I would love your feedback. You can leave a comment on the show notes for this episode. You can also click the SpeakPipe button on the website, or you can call the House of EdTech hotline at 732-903-4869. And you can also use the new email, which I announced last episode, and the new email for the show is feedback@chrisnesi.com. Or send a tweet. I'm Mr. Nesi on Twitter, that's MRNESI, and use the hashtag House of EdTech. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Your 5-star rating and positive review will help keep the House of EdTech podcast front and center for others to discover and enjoy. And be sure to come back to the House for the next episode, which I'll be releasing on June 22nd, 2014, and I'll be speaking to Timothy Charleston. He is a knowledgeable supervisor of instruction and technology, and he has some great tools and insight that he's going to be sharing with all of you. Thank you for listening, and remember, using technology isn't difficult, just give it a try.